Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Entrepreneurship 101. A couple of announcements to make at the start. First, really quite happy to tell you that for those of you who are in the Upstart competition, we have a second $10,000 prize that will be on offer. Yes, yay, indeed. It's an anonymous $5,000 donation that has been matched by a $5,000 contribution from our SIG practice, social innovation. So this will go, it's the Blended Value Opportunity Prize. And those of you who are our entrants will get more details, but the key here is the question, does the venture strike a good balance between potential impact results for greater good of society and potential financial return for investors? So this is kind of the social impact counterpart to our more traditional financial impact. So I'm really thrilled that we now have two $10,000 prizes. And just to let you know who the judges of the competition will be, we will have Tim Draymond, who is the head of SIG National, Peter Evans from our ICE practice here, Shirley Speakman, who is one of the senior investment managers of our Investment Accelerator Fund, Arshia Tabrizi, who you'll remember gave one of the talks, Tabrizi Law Office, and Jeff Brown from CIBC. So 5 judges as opposed to 3 to give a good wide balance of opinions for all of the entrants. So second thing that I did want to do today was to extend a special welcome to both staff and clients from the Wood Green Foundation. Wood Green Foundation is one of the original founding United Way agencies, and the team that's here today are from their Newcomers to Canada program. So we have here, and I can see folks with badges, and I suspect that these are our guests from Wood Green. These are newcomer professionals I'm just looking in technology, medicine, finance, IT. I can honestly say Mars believes, along with Wood Green, that Canada is the stronger for the presence of newcomers like yourself and the new perspectives that you bring and the skills that you bring to us. So I really welcome you here, not only to Mars, and I'm sure Earl has already done that, but to our Entrepreneurship 101 program. We hope you'll feel free to come back. Today is a particularly good day to have you here, because today is one of our Meet the Entrepreneurs sessions, particularly Cleantech today. So there is not only a panel discussion, but there will be an opportunity to network and talk with folks. And we really do encourage you to take advantage of that and buttonhole whoever you can to talk to folks about getting plugged into our technological community here. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Jon Dogterom, who was your speaker last week, who will be today's moderator, to come up and introduce the panelists.
Thanks very much. Great to be here, and really excited to be able to ask this particular panel questions tonight. I work in our advisory services group in the Cleantech practice, and I've had the opportunity of working with all 3 of the people that we have here tonight, and it's been a great pleasure, and I think we're going to be able to learn a lot from them. So with that, I want to introduce them one by one. I will leave it to them to give us a summary of their business and what their company does. The first person we have joining us is Kamal Hassan, who for 5 years has been the CEO of a company called Skymeter. Until last week, where he made a bit of a change. He's on the board of directors of Skymeter now. He helped found the company in 2006, and he's been responsible for those 5 years in building the business, leading the finance strategy and operations. This isn't Kamal's first venture. He's been a CEO before with a company called In Your Pocket, and was also an interim CEO for Zeno Global. He has a management consulting background from Bain & Company, and also worked in R&D for IMAX Corporation. He's a graduate of Queen's University and has an MBA from INSEAD out of France. So join me in welcoming Kamal. The next entrepreneur that we have here is Daniel Moneta. He's the CEO and co-founder of a company called MMB Research. He graduated from the Schulich School of Business at York University with an emphasis on strategic management and marketing. And throughout his career, he has been pursuing entrepreneurship and emerging markets. And he's been involved in some businesses before in the early startup stage. He did an internship at a dot-com incubator and did some restructuring of operations for a leasing and financing firm. And he has a really good background and a lot of experience in bootstrapping and building up a technology company. So join me in welcoming Daniel. And our third panelist is Nicolas Morgan. He is the Director and VP of Business Development for a company called Morgan Solar. And he co-founded this business a few years ago. He has a bachelor in social science and a postgraduate degree in applied information technology. And before starting with Morgan in 2008, he spent a couple years in Spain as a senior manager for Fawn Technologies, which was a web-based startup as well. So again, great background, great prior experience before going into the endeavor of Morgan Solar. He also worked at Ernst & Young doing risk management and business process advising for the Ontario electricity sector. So join me in welcoming Nick as well. So what we're going to do is I'm going to start off with a series of questions, and they're all questions that I think will help in kind of guiding some conversation. And then what I'll do a little later on is open it up to you guys to ask any questions that you're still wondering about. So the first thing I want to start with is getting a quick summary from them on what their business is. So Daniel, if we can start with you on MMB.
Sure. So, we've all been hearing that we need to save energy, but it's not just how much energy we use. Often changing when we use that energy can have some of the greatest impact. For instance, here in Toronto, the utilities have been going to time of use billing. They're trying to convince us to stop using power when it's peaking and very expensive and start using it when it's much cheaper. But unfortunately, the odds that everyone's going to start doing their laundry at 2 o'clock in the morning to the point where it actually makes a difference is very low. We're inherently lazy people who like to do the exact same thing we've always been doing. So electronics companies, appliance companies, utilities are bringing out a new generation of energy-aware devices into our lives that can respond to that consumption and price information and make a lot of that energy management decisions for us. What we do is we build a little hardware and software, think of it like an energy management Wi-Fi card that goes into thermostats and refrigerators and smart meters and all sorts of devices that allow them to connect to each other and to smart meters and to the grid and respond to that kind of information. And it allows companies that build these things to do that very, very quickly and easily and get those products to market rapidly.
Thanks, Daniel.
Thank you.
And Kamal, you can tell us a little bit about Skymeter?
Sure. So Skymeter is a smart metering company for cars. And just to make sense of that, imagine if your car had a little box in it and it would automatically pay all of its parking every minute you were parked. You never have to feed a meter, you never need to worry about a ticket. It's just paid for you on a bill at the end of the month. Now that's what it does for you as a user. That's only one of the things you can pay for with your car. There's the car itself, your insurance, your roads. All of these things could actually be paid based on how much, when, and how you drive. And if you do that as a society, then you get all the benefits of smart metering and electricity, et cetera. You really change things. I mean, we believe that if Skymeter is a success, your children or your grandchildren will look at you and say, used to sit in traffic jams? What did you do that for?
Great. And Nick?
Wow, solving traffic jams, that's almost science fiction, but that's amazing. Traffic is one of my pet peeves. Our company, Morgan Solar, has developed a new type of solar panel. This is something that is not for your rooftop. It's not a typical solar panel, and it doesn't look like one. We've used a sophisticated new class of optics that we invented to concentrate a lot of sunlight onto very small, ultra-high efficiency photovoltaic chips that are developed like microchips. These allow us to make an incredibly high efficiency, very low cost solar panel. The original market that we envisioned it for was for big utility scale applications. We're talking about huge solar farms in the desert. But as the costs started to become really apparent of how compelling they were, and the minimum scale of the system becomes apparent, we're starting to realize that there may be a lot more consumer applications for the technology. More consumer applications to the technology than we thought. And we're starting to look at the consumer market in Ontario and in the world. The initial product is a ground-mounted system. It's not going to go on rooftops at all. So it's not going to be for, you're not going to see a lot of them in cities. But the opportunity to make a really low-cost solar panel is extremely compelling. And we've got buy-in from some very, very big potential partners. So it's been very exciting.
Thanks. So we have three fantastic business ideas here. And the first question that I have is where did the idea originate from, and how did you end up getting involved in it? So
I can start again. So we had actually, this is the second, I guess, real startup that I had been a part of. I don't know which one of us that is, but myself and my two partners were at a previous company where we had developed some energy management systems for the hotel industry, and we left that and started this company. I won't get too into it, but it was kind of a sudden departure, and here we were, three guys with, we knew we had a good set of complementary skills, and we didn't want to go off and work for something else. We wanted to start our own thing. So we decided, first of all, we needed some sort of income, so we did a little bit of bootstrapping. We did some various contract engineering projects here and there, admittedly not much of a specific direction, but we knew that by doing that we would be able to explore the market, fund the company a little bit, and find a market niche. And we did fairly quickly. One of our first customers was a thermostat vendor who they're a large thermostat company. They white label for all sorts of brands like 3M and Home Depot, and they had developed this great thermostat that takes these like Game Boy cartridges that go in the back that can add various kinds of connectivity, and they knew that we had the capability to implement that. So it was a custom project that we did just for them. They would start shopping it out to some of their customers, and even though we did an excellent job and the thermostat worked great, they would have trouble getting it up and running and getting it to connect. And so we would send them some software that we had made that helped automate it, and suddenly everything would work. And these were companies that, should have been able to do this, large metering vendors, utilities, et cetera. And so the first question we get from them is, can we buy this product? And so we thought, yes, we should sell that product. So we, developed a more commercializable format of it, and started selling it as desktop software and embedded software that could go on wireless chips. And the product grew out from there. So I think, it was a bit harder in the beginning in terms of not having a direction, but being able to respond to market demand that's clearly in front of you, as opposed to inventing something, building it without having a lot of market validation, then trying to push it. I think that can be a difficult, though sometimes rewarding experience too.
Daniel, just to kind of put things into perspective, I'm wondering if you can give us some idea now. You mentioned kind of that initial customer in the poll. How many customers do you have today, and what's kind of the size of your organization today?
So the size of our organization is we're at 15 people, and we're growing fairly rapidly now. We actually just put a bunch of job postings on our website, so if any of you are engineers or good salespeople, please check that out. But we grew fairly rapidly. We went from 3 to about 15, 16 in the last few years. In terms of customers, that also happened rapidly, especially once we had a good solid customer that had a lot of exposure in the market, they brought more in. One of the nice things about working in an era of networking, it's both a technological network, but also a business network. So everybody has to have a product that works with someone else's, so they bring people in to do tech support and to get their solutions up and running. So now I would say, we have well over 100 customers that have bought various pieces of our software and hardware, and we have at least a couple dozen who are actually integrating our hardware and software into those products and bringing those products to market or already selling them on the market.
Okay. And Kamal, so Scientific American recently called the metering of vehicles one of the top ideas today. And so can you kind of put into perspective for us where the idea originated for Skymeter and how you got involved?
Sure. I can actually take none of the credit for the idea. There's a gentleman called Bern Grush who back in 2002 got a ticket, and he said, why can't my car pay for things automatically? Why do I need to get a ticket when I wanted to pay anyway? And he was a rather unusual gentleman because he co-founded 3 previous companies, one in satellite imaging and 2 of them in financial transactions. So this is doing financial transactions using satellite technology for your car. So it's a very good mix. So he did the original science from 2002 to 2006. I actually met him in 2003, and he'd actually co-founded 3 companies before this, and he was an unusual scientist because he said, look, I've run companies before. I know how big they can get. And I actually don't like running companies. I like doing the science. So he was looking for someone to work with to build the business out. And when I met him in 2003, I wasn't very excited. I thought, how big is the parking market? Really, what's here? It's a cute little gadget. So I started part-time in 2006. I said, sure, I'll be an interim CEO, help you pull some money together. And I started to do the business plan. And the business plan, every time I wrote it, the revenue numbers, I said, there's a mistake here. We got a problem here. We got to cut the numbers by 10. Still looking very interesting. So I ultimately co-founded Skymeter with him as a proper operating business in November of 2006.
Thanks. And Nick, maybe you can shed some light on how you came up with this solar idea.
Well, like Kamal, I did not come up with the idea. My brother is the genius of the family. I'm just riding his coattails, fully a parasite. Seriously, the fundamental idea of being interested in solar, both of us were really interested in energy. I was actually doing some business advice work and risk management work when the Ontario electrical industry was deregulating, and I found it. The more I learned, the more fascinated I was. And at the time, we talked about maybe starting a company doing something with hydrogen fuel cells. I had this idea about a distributed generation company. Made a lot of sense, the numbers made sense, but the technology that we really wanted to use just wasn't quite there, and we sort of left it and we did other things. But we had been thinking about it for a while, and solar always made a lot of sense. I mean, I think everyone gets it. You're outside on a beautiful sunny day. If you know anything about science, that is energy just falling on the ground. It's not that much energy per square meter, but it is energy and it's free. And so it was always compelling. My brother was in Africa working with Doctors Without Borders, doing field work, logistics basically, and wiring up the lighting at a hospital, organizing building a bridge, etc. And he came back and he felt really inspired, and he wanted to go back to Africa for the rest of his life. And my dad sat him down and said, listen, I get what you want to do. You want to help people. And if you do what you're saying you're going to do, you're going to go back to Africa and you're going to help people in this one town. And hopefully there won't be a conflict there that burns down everything you built, which had actually happened. So he's like saying, instead, what if you helped everyone a little bit? What if you actually did something that made the world a better place for everyone? You don't help a small group of people in a very tangible way, but you do something that makes the world a better place. And he has, my brother had the kind of mind that was a serious suggestion. So he started thinking about going to work in solar, and he thought that the type of solar that we're developing made a lot of sense, and there are a lot of companies doing it, and they're all doing the same basic thing. They're taking a lens, they're putting it on top of a box, they're buying these chips, the same ones we buy, that are these ultra-high efficiency photovoltaic cells, and sticking with the bottom of the box, and trying to figure out a way to make that into a solar panel. And he really just said, that doesn't look like a product to me. That looks like a lab experiment. So he just sort of said, there's all these weird complications with trying to do this. The box itself adds all these costs, it adds all these problems, and then solving the problems makes it more expensive, and it just ends up not quite working. And so he said, well, the lens is really the problem. If you could just concentrate light in a better way, so you could take the box out, you would have a better product. But that's not how lenses work. So he said, okay, I think I'm going to try to invent a better set of optics. Which is kind of crazy, because the ancient Greeks invented lenses, and Archimedes invented parabolic mirrors. And so literally it's been about 2,000 years since someone thought of a way to concentrate sunlight. And my brother just did some math, and he said, no, it's possible. So he got a little bit of money from me and my dad, and came back a few months later and said, I've done the math. I think I've got an idea. A couple months later, we hired a couple of engineers. A couple months after that, I quit my job. And here we're about 4 years later now. And what he came up with was literally an entirely new class of concentrating optics. It is an injection molded sheet of plastic. All the light that falls on the surface is trapped inside of it and carried to the center, where this little chip is attached. And it doesn't sound that big a deal. We took the box out of the system, but it really has let us come up with this incredibly compelling system in terms of cost and efficiency. And it really took that sort of ability to step back and say, well, we just need to invent a new class of optics. That's I'm still blown away by that, but the idea really came from there. It took us a year to even understand what we'd invented. It took us another year to have a clue how to commercialize it. But it's, the learning curve has been steep, but it's also been the most fun thing we've ever done.
Thanks. So starting a business can be a pretty daunting task, and there's a lot to cover off. What I'm curious about is what has been the most unexpected challenge that you've come across that you did not realize would be as tough as it's been in getting your business off the ground?
So I think probably a story from the last company I worked for. It probably applies here. So not to go too deep into it. So this wasn't a company that I was necessarily the CEO of or had started, but myself and my two partners were fairly deep into it. And as I said before, it was an energy management system in the hospitality industry. But one of the things we hadn't anticipated was, and it's a wonderful problem to have, but to have more opportunities than you can possibly handle come at you. And when you start going down one avenue, there will be other things that you never thought of, and new opportunities and new companies. We were pursuing, maybe streetlight automation for a while, and commercial and hospital automation, and all of these things. Like you said, you do the math and you go, okay, that's big, but ultimately you're 5 or 6 people, in a room in Markham, and you can only take on so much. And again, you see the numbers and you think, how can we say no to this? And that was a real big challenge, both for us and getting the management to engage on that and saying, okay, you know what, it's so tempting. There are all these other opportunities, and when you're young and you're small and you're going to go after any revenue that comes to you, to actually say no to things that are out there is incredibly painful. But you end up spreading yourself too thin, and you can't be successful at anything you do. So really having a laser-like focus on what you're doing, not ignoring different directions that you might steer it in that may take what you've built and move it to something that's more profitable or more lucrative, but not trying to go after everything is very, very key and very, very hard to do. And even now, we've built this company with that philosophy. We're very much in the smart energy device enablement business. There's lots of other opportunities that have come our way that we've had to say no to, some contract engineering that we've had to say no to. We just want to focus on pushing the product that we have and getting it into as many different devices and platforms out there as possible. But even still, now that we have some more resources and some more engineering talent, it is hard to do that. And part of it is really just from the beginning, understanding, the standard question you get asked, and I think it was one of the first questions we got asked when we came into Mars, which was, okay, where do you want your company to be in 5 years? And you really do need to ask yourself, and that can change over time, but, do you want to, just have a living that goes on for decades and provides you with some income? That's fine. You can do a little bit of things here and there, but if you want to build a ton of value in this one, really specialized area and then sell your company in 5 years to someone else, then maybe you're not maximizing revenue, maybe you're not going after everything and focusing. So understanding that and resisting that temptation was something that was a lot harder to do.
So focus, a key, yeah.
Yeah.
Kamal, unexpected challenge?
There's sort of two which come to mind. One which comes to mind if I sort of replay what's happened with the company. By the way, this isn't the first time I've done this. So I've been involved with companies before. So a lot of the challenges were ones I knew, I'd seen, I expected. We have a technology which is effectively like building a cell phone system from scratch, or a BlackBerry, starting from scratch to build the BlackBerry. And in retrospect, if I could have done it, it would have been great to invest more in the technology and not even do any sales work for the first 3 years and just sort of put every penny you have into technology, get it perfect, and then get it out. But I don't think we would have been able to raise the money, get the customer interest, get the customer feedback to actually design what we had if we hadn't put some money into sales. But that's probably sort of one rebalancing, which is exactly the opposite of what they tell you. They always tell you, get out in the marketplace, try to sell it before it's ready. The challenge you have when our customers are large customers, because the way we're going to crack the world is just by doing our little piece, the metering, and letting large companies offer the services themselves. And when you're dealing with large companies who are going to run your services, the utility type people, you need to have a product which is really far down the road before they'll actually be able to buy it.
Thanks.
It's funny, actually, the focus and saying no is so important. And I think that as I was sitting there, I was thinking, that really was what I was going to say. Learning to let opportunities, the second opportunity isn't an opportunity, it's a risk to the first one. A lot of the time, and that's something that I really wish I'd learned earlier. But I think that it's actually part of there are a lot of fundamental things in human nature that you need to sort of learn to do the opposite of them, or to anticipate them in being an entrepreneur. No matter how many times I have underestimated how long it's going to take to do something, or we've come up with a really conservative budget for something and gone way over it, or sort of evaluated how hard something was going to be to figure out and got it wrong every time. No matter how many times we're wrong with those sorts of things, you sort of just think next time you're going to be right. And you sort of eventually learn to really, it's funny, you got to trust yourself, but you got to stop trusting yourself when it comes to making any kind of prediction, making any kind of assessment of the future, you have to assume that things are going to take 100 times longer than you thought. They're going to be 50 times more expensive, and the project is probably going to fail. And then if you can still convince yourself that you should probably go forward, then it's probably a really good idea and probably really worth doing. But it's something that I find you can really waste a lot of time trying to stick to these imaginary schedules that you came up with months ago, or budgets. You can't spend more money than you have, but you get better at learning how to be skeptical of a budget. I had someone come to me with something, and their budget ended in cents. And I looked at them and I said, are you out of your mind? Are you kidding? But I can say that I got lucky in what I was doing right before I started this company. I was at a company that had not understood how to market itself initially. And the person who was marketing for that company thought marketing was web design. And I know I've changed tacks here, but it was a really important lesson to have learned. They thought that marketing was web design. And we were a Web 2.0 company. Our main interaction with our customers was our website. So it sort of made, it didn't seem completely crazy. But we just kept failing when we'd launch these projects. And the projects sounded really good, and customers would be excited. The people who really loved what we were doing wanted to be a part of these projects, and they would fail every time. And I knew I was leaving, and I had the trust of the venture capitalists that were backing the company. And they knew I was leaving, so they said, can you help us figure out what's going on? And I figured out that the person who's running our marketing is a complete idiot. They're worthless at their job, and they need to be fired. The chief of operations, who was the de facto CEO, because the CEO was a good CEO for some things, but he was not an operations CEO. He didn't know most of the employees' names. So the chief of operations didn't have the creativity to understand what we were doing. He didn't really get our company. And so I literally said, these 4 senior managers have to go. They are incompetent, and they will drag this company down. And that was my recommendation to the board. And I knew I was leaving, so I didn't care I was burning bridges. And the day after I gave this recommendation, these 4 managers signed a letter saying there needs to be a fundamental shift in the direction of the company. These are the things we want to change. They're going to be very drastic, but we've lost confidence the company is going to go forward, and if we don't do them, we're going to quit. So the board accepted their resignation, and they were cash flow positive a year later. And maybe it was a coincidence. It could be that I was wrong, but it gave me this confidence in, okay, figure out the marketing, figure out the fundamental, do you understand your company? And I think what that gave me going forward, that I'm glad I know, that is, I meet a lot of people who don't understand what it is they're doing. They've got great ideas, they've even got great companies, but they really actually don't get it. And so you just really got to question yourself all the time. I think you have to have a lot of doubt, because otherwise you're going to make crazy decisions. Entrepreneurs are by definition overconfident, cocky, and a little willing to take big risks. And so if you don't balance that with a lot of self-analysis, you're going to make big mistakes.
Thanks.
You still might make big mistakes, by the way.
So another question I have is, what are some of the key supports that you guys have relied on through the process of getting your business off the ground and to where it is now?
So, I mean, not to put in a big plug for the guys behind me here, but Mars has actually been very, very helpful in terms of getting us off the ground. The first company, we didn't really have a lot of that. This one, we started off, actually Arshia, who Tony had mentioned earlier, is our attorney, and he did some of the Entrepreneurship 101 sessions, and we pretty much started the company coming to these sessions and getting to know the advisory team, and it's been extremely, extremely helpful connecting us with the people that we needed to be connected with to ask the big questions. We started this company off actually dealing with some fairly large companies. Here we are, 3 people in, like, honestly, my basement or my grandparents' basement actually, and we're talking to GE and companies like this, and how to manage that interface, how to manage that support, to be able to come in and talk to someone who's had 40, 50 years of experience doing that, I think is was extremely useful. And those advisors that we started working with in the early days and that we met through this program, including the people who now do our research and development tax credits and our attorneys and even people who eventually became investors, we all met through this and continue to be very valuable to us now. So that would certainly be a key area.
A question that came to mind there was, so you guys are a small company and you mentioned working with GE. Clearly you're working with some of the biggest OEMs out there.
Sure.
And what I'm wondering is, how is a small organization and a handful of people, how do you work with these companies? How do you convince them that you guys can do it? Or what's some of the challenges that you've had in your go-to-market strategy working with them?
Well, I'd say the thing that's been most successful for us in engaging with a large company is our stuff works. And I mean, that sounds kind of trite, but honestly, when they're trying to enter a new market and people are struggling to build systems, or they're looking at a year and a half time frame, and you come in here with a product or a solution that can make that dishwasher talk to the smart meter, and it only took the engineer in charge of the project 3 hours to get it to do that, instead of the year and a half of traveling around the world to wireless conferences to finally get that demo up and running, and his VP is coming in. That's definitely the way to start it. And typically in a tech business, in a clean tech business, you actually start with the engineers who don't necessarily care. They know that there is an advantage to large companies in that they're not worried about procurement. It's the procurement person's problem 2 years from now to figure out how they're going to manage that and how they're going to de-risk it and how they're going to second source. Right now their job is get the thing to work. So that helps a lot. The caveat to that is big companies have a lot of bureaucracy. They demand a lot of time. They require a lot of assistance. We spent a lot of time supporting some of our larger customers. And when you're a small company, you're like, okay, whatever you want, we'll answer the phone. We're not going to charge you anything, as long as buy some of our development kits. And they have, but you do have to be mindful of that and make sure that doesn't get away from you, and make sure you're not putting all of your support resources into one big customer that might at the end of the day decide you're too small and go somewhere else. With regards to how to transition that, you have to be able to, I'm trying to think of a good word from this, and platformize is kind of odd, but we have this software platform that lives on our hardware. The odds of a large multinational company sourcing a key component from a company that's 10 people in an office in Toronto is fairly slim. They always want second suppliers. They always want some of these companies won't deal with you if you don't employ at least 500 people. So it can be a challenge. So you fairly quickly need to start looking at partners that can help take you there. So in our example, we make these little wireless modules. There are a number of companies that make that hardware. They don't have nearly the advanced kind of software, the intellectual property that we do, but they see that as valuable in going to the market. So we're currently in talks with one of the larger ones out there that's going to start selling development kits and modules, again, similar to ours, but with our software on it, but with their name. So being able to say to a large company like GE, okay, yeah, we understand you don't want to buy from us, but here's our partner, and we're licensing our software to them anyway, so I don't care. Those kind of partnerships are very, very valuable to have, because at the end of the day, it's almost an insurance question for them. And no matter how awesome you are, if they are concerned that you're suddenly going to disappear, it's going to be an issue for their purchasing team.
Yeah, thanks. So, Kamal, some of the key supports that you've relied on in Skymeter?
So we first came into Mars, and Mars is one of them, in July or so of 2006, July, August, something like that. Met with Peter Evans, one of the advisors, because we were recommended to meet with him. And first thing we said after we met with him for a bit, we said, hey, this is really cool. How do we go about moving into the building here? And gather it's competitive to get in here, but they like the idea, so we came in. So Mars has been very useful. Mars is useful beyond the obvious advice. Mars is useful just for the same reason that Wall Street's the place to do business in New York City. You want to be where the action is, and there's a lot of things going on here, which just being part of the community is very useful. The other sort of big thing for your support is using your network all you can. I've got a friend who's a former venture capitalist. He's somebody I jump on the phone, and he's not involved with the company, so I can talk things over with. If you look at our investors, more than half of the investment money we've raised has been because I am willing to aggressively work my network, and not just the people I know, but the people they will introduce me to, et cetera, to raise funds. Because one of the biggest challenges you will have or can have in starting a company is the first stage of funding. And that's really been just a willingness to say to everybody, this is what I'm doing, this is how amazing it is, do you want to be a part of it, do you know someone else who wants to be a part of it? So your larger network from wherever and whoever it is.
Thanks. Nick, key supports?
I would definitely echo Mars has been huge for us, and the networking at Mars has actually been, without question, the most valuable part. And the degree to which it's been pivotal to our success is actually shocking. We were trying to raise money in 2008, 2009 during the financial crisis, and it was a nightmare. We finally had investors that we were really excited about, a term sheet, very good value for where we were in our progress. And at the very last moment, we suddenly had a $2 million shortfall in the fund. And we really needed, we weren't raising money just so that we'd have money. We needed every penny we wanted to raise. It was really, I came here. I came to the guy that was in Jon's position before Jon stepped into it, Tom Rand, who's still here, but and I said, I need $2 million and I need it like in 2 weeks. And I knew it was impossible, but Tom said, well, I know some people who've got money and they might move fast. We had really good strategic investors who'd already signed in, who had done the best due diligence on the market, a major utility, one of the biggest renewable energy companies in the world, and a major plastics manufacturer, $1 billion global plastics company. And so sort of the two key questions are, can you build it and is it worth anything? We'd sort of address those with who was in the round. So it was possible, but it was hard. And we did it. Tom helped me raise $2 million in 2 weeks. And that was pure networking. So to say that it's not, networking isn't, it helps you get a customer downstream. Networking is, my company is this far away from falling apart completely. I know how to save it, but I don't have the resources. Somebody in your network does. And Mars is a way of just amplifying the value of that network and the number of people in it. So I really just can't stress enough how valuable that, Mars and this sort of thing, but Mars is sort of at the center of it. You start here, the OCE is important. Going to the provincial government has been phenomenal for us. Our connections through the Ontario Centres of Excellence to different universities have been really pivotal. But the one thing that I haven't heard is our employees. We hired a couple of engineers right out of school. First 2 people we hired, we trained them ourselves, and they have performed beyond any reasonable expectation of amazing. They have developed a brand of workaholic dedication to the company that we worry about them. I'll come out of my office at 8 p.m. and say, what are you still doing here? And they'll say, you're still here. And I'm like, it's not a contest, go home. And I'll come in on a Sunday to pick something up and half the team will be there. If what you're doing is exciting and your employees really feel like they're a part of it, and you make them a part of it, not just that they work there, but they are a part of it. Our employees have truly been spectacular, and we are an even mix of, we find the best talent we can. And that's not all coming out of Toronto universities. We've got some amazing people from all over the world. But Toronto does, or the Ontario universities produce some amazing engineers and other graduates, and that's been an absolute asset for us. We came to Toronto for very different reasons, but we were really lucky that we did.
Some great points there. I'd actually like to maybe, Kamal, if you could comment on some of the pros and cons of building a business in Toronto and in Canada, a business of that type. Nick referred to some funds and talent. How have you found it?
So the pro is absolutely the same as what Nick said. Getting people here is amazing. And it's not just the fresh graduate engineers. If you look through our team, we've got a PhD in math from Romania, a Chinese programmer. We've got the CTO is Indian, etc. I mean, you just go through the list. There is just so much talent here, both with the graduates from the universities here and with the immigrants who come here, that staffing is almost a non-issue. You can find really good people if you're looking for them. One of the challenges here is that there are fewer funds available and less obvious funds. There's a lot of money running around the city, but it's not really through formal venture capital channels. So it is harder to access money than other environments such as New York City, Silicon Valley, etc. So that is the challenge. You have great people, you work a little harder for your money. Whereas if you're in another part of the world, you might have the money come easier, but have a shortage of talent.
Daniel, any comments, pros and cons on Toronto?
Well, I mean, this is the second company I've been in Toronto. We haven't really had too much experience elsewhere. But no, I mean, I would echo that. The talent pool is phenomenal. Most of our engineering staff is U of T and Waterloo, and similarly, they're extremely motivated and energetic and brilliant. And one of our investors was talking about, I think, the Waterloo competitive advantage, and I'd never really thought about it that way, but yes, the kind of engineering talent that we've had is far superior to what I've seen at other companies that are competitive or in our industry, and it's a huge advantage. I also come out of my office and people are still there, though. That's usually our Monday night StarCraft game that goes until late. But no, I would say that's been a big deal for us, and like I said, we've been looking for new talent lately, and the quality and wealth of resumes that have come through the door are actually quite spectacular. With regards to the funding, I was just going to say, it's a little, it's not Silicon Valley, it's not New York, but on the very beginning, on the starting end, Toronto, or I guess Canada in general, has a lot of advantages. There are a number of government programs. There's things like SHRED, which is Research and Development Tax Credit Program, which if you stick around the Entrepreneurship 101 sessions long enough, you will certainly find out about that. And it is completely invaluable. I mean, you pretty much get 60 cents on every dollar you spend on R&D back. This year I think we got about a $250,000 tax refund. That's seed money, that's angel money. Yeah. So to be able to, we would not have been able to get into where we are, and just having recently done our first outside investment round without that. And that's a huge advantage to being in Toronto and being in Canada.
Non-dilutive cash. Yeah.
Yes.
I should add one more thing, by the way, on the staffing. There's great technical staff. People often say, are there a lot of experienced business people sort of on the sales side, et cetera, here in Toronto? And it's really interesting. We found that there are really talented expat Canadians who are down in Silicon Valley, who are over in Europe, who are off in Asia, some of whom want to come home and have built up those international sales network and experience. And actually, that's what we found is we've got some good Canadians from overseas working for us to fill in some of those roles who've got their experience elsewhere.
Yeah, we've had at least 3 or 4 people, really talented people that left Toronto to go to Silicon Valley or go to California, and then they're desperate to move back to Toronto. So we're seeing a lot of that, I guess, foreign educated talent now coming back into the country.
There's a comment on the investment side of things, the money. There is a clustering effect, and it is easier to find investors if you're in Silicon Valley, if you're doing something that Silicon Valley investors know. I had someone say to me when we were raising money at one point years ago, if I'm going to give you money, you have to move here. And when we said, why? He said, well, because if I get in my car and drive 60 miles in any direction, I'm going to be driving past 100 really good opportunities to invest. So why the heck would I invest in one that I got to take a 6-hour or 5-hour plane to go visit you? And they do. Investors do want that. But the fact is there are clusters, but there are investors in Connecticut who are commuting to New York every day, and they don't care if you're in Toronto. There are investors in Spain that it takes 9 months to do the paperwork required to register a company. And so entrepreneurship there is so stagnant. There are investors in all sorts of places that assume they're going to have to go overseas for their investments. And so you can bring money here. It seems harder to do, and there used to be, they're making the laws better, but it's getting easier to bring investment into the country. And your networks here, Toronto's the most international city in the world. It really is. There's statistics to back that up. And so your networks actually extend to a lot of these places that there is often money there. and there's nothing wrong with bringing it here. So the money here there isn't a Manolo Park, there isn't a Sand Hill Road, which is this famous cluster of it's just building after building. It's just venture capitalists and investment bankers in San Francisco. Well, there isn't anything like that here, but there is money here, and there are people who are looking for opportunities to invest. There's more money than there are good ideas.
So we're pretty much out of time here, but I have a whole bunch of other questions that I wanted to get to. What I want to do, I just want to ask 2 more questions, but you guys only get to answer with a sentence, okay, so that we can get through these. My next one is, what is the one thing you know now that you wish you knew when you started the business?
You guys go first.
That the entire global finance system was a Ponzi scheme. But no, really, that project finance is the biggest challenge that we had to solve. Lots of people want to buy solar, but solar projects are hugely expensive, and you can't pay for them the way you pay for an iPod. So I really am not marketing to my customers. I'm marketing to the people that will loan them money. And that took us a while to figure out, and it's really important to understand not just who your customer is, but how they're going to pay for your product. And for big capital projects like ours, that was a big deal.
Great. Kamal?
Sometimes the easiest thing and the easiest application to sell to is not necessarily the one that the customers are all asking you for.
Great.
Learning about and starting to work on government programs and funding opportunities early. There's lots of them out there, and they are sometimes as large an administrative burden as you would imagine them to be. So sometimes it takes a year to actually learn how to do it properly and who to actually talk to get it done right. So it's best to start even before you think you need them.
Thanks. Okay, and my last question is, so we have an audience full of lots of people that are thinking about running with a new idea that they have. And I just want a quick sentence on your one piece of advice for them before they quit their day job and go with their idea.
Make sure you found at least one person who's willing to buy it.
Be ready to work harder than you've ever worked in your life for 1/10 of the money. And if you can do that, if you're willing to do that, if the idea is that inspiring, then do it.
You were making a 10.
One piece of advice for someone thinking about starting out, if you're too attached to your personal life, then you shouldn't be an entrepreneur. If you have really good friends that you have to see on a day-to-day basis, just forget it. But seriously, find an entrepreneur who, it doesn't matter if they've failed, if they were in business for at least a couple of years, sit them down and actually ask them the administrative, the detail stuff. You waste so much time reinventing the wheel. You waste so much time in your first year figuring out just basic stuff that really shouldn't be that hard. Mars has an entrepreneur in residence program where they'll give you high-level strategic advice. They need an administrative assistant in residence to explain how to have a domain name for your website, email addresses, how to properly write an employee manual. There's all this stuff that should be really easy, and every entrepreneur seems to waste 6 months of their life figuring it all out. I wish I'd just gone and asked somebody, because it wouldn't have been that hard.
Great. Thanks very much, guys. That was great. I hope everyone learned a lot. And what I want to do is open it up to everyone here to ask some questions that you might be thinking about that I didn't get to. So, yeah, and there's actually microphones in the aisles here. If people want to just step up to those, that's probably the best way. Go ahead.
Yes, hi, thank you very much. One of you spoke about the very initial phase where you got some seed money through bootstrapping. But for the 2 other companies, I just wanted to know how you managed to get to the first pot of money that you could use to work full-time on your project, and what kind of amounts we're speaking about.
So in our case, there were myself and Byrne, who effectively funded the company ourselves for the first few months till we actually founded it. So initially was make no money, invest money in the business. We founded the company in November, among other things, so we could take in outside investment. I think our first round of outside investment was about $160,000, which allowed us to actually hire a few people to work on things.
Great, thanks, Kamal.
We were lucky that I had a very good job before I started. I was able to save quite a bit of money. I didn't pay myself for the first 7 months or so, but I was able to live off my savings. We dipped into credit cards, but we were most lucky in that me and my brother's father, who is also the chairman of our board, is the CEO of a very large multinational consulting company. And so he was able to actually fund a lot of the early stage stuff straight out of family funds. And without that, I honestly don't know where we would have got the money. I think now that we are where we are, I think we might have found something, but it would have been less and it would have been harder to get. So we got lucky there, and we know it.
Yeah. Next question.
Yes, you are all in the clean tech environment. How being a clean technology company based had played in getting customers and pricing your products? How the clean aspect of your business has played on that environment?
People give you the benefit of the doubt. If you have found a way to more efficiently grind up mountains to get the coal out, you're sort of their enemy. Clean tech people, I can't speak for smart metering, but solar, people love it. They want it. They get it. You're taking sunshine and turning it into electricity. And the clean tech part of it gets you a lot of buy-in from people who you get another minute to explain what you're doing. I think that if it was a similar idea but in nuclear, I think a lot of people would just be like, oh, that's nice. But as soon as you say solar, really? Oh, that's cool. And they want to know more. So the clean tech part helps. It's the reaction. Everyone saw Al Gore's movie, and that was just pure marketing for us. So it's like a 2-hour-long commercial.
In our case, Cleantech hasn't necessarily done a lot for us. It's interesting because we're a new area in Cleantech and everyone knows solar and they go boom. And everyone goes smart meter. Oh, smart meter for electricity, boom. And then you say smart meter for transport and they go, never heard of it before. And it takes till 2010 for Scientific American to say one of 10 world-changing ideas for the year. So it does open up new funding sources. We've got some investors who actually care about the environmental side of what we're doing. A lot of our customers, to be blunt, they're using Cleantech a little bit for their marketing, but often the customer doesn't even care. They just think of it as efficiency and running things better, and Cleantech is often a sort of, oh yeah, and by the way, some people will buy more of this because it's good for the environment.
Yeah, I think my answer would be a bit of a combination of the both. It does help with the marketing and getting your story out, and it gets you those elevator pitch opportunities a little bit more because you get to start off with, okay, we're helping to save energy, and we can demonstrate how much we're doing that. In terms of our actual technology and customers and pricing, by the time it gets down to it, again, we're selling an electronic communications component to an engineer who has to integrate it, and the most important thing to him is not necessarily how much energy it saves, but that it works. Then they make that work, and they can validate the energy saving, and it helps everybody tell their story better. But that said, a big part of our sales even come out of, I don't want to say greenwashing, but a lot of companies really want to go out there and show that they're doing something, even if it's just a demo, even if it's just an example. And a lot of the technology we have that allows people to go from, okay, we just want to show this thing at a trade show, to actually having something to show in a week's time, allows them to do that, and then they start saying, okay, wow, we can actually develop this into a real product. So we do piggyback on that motivation a lot, but at the end of the day, we're selling a wireless component, and it has to work, and it has to be priced competitively.
I think that goes to a fundamental thing. If the only really great thing about your idea is that it's clean tech, then it's probably really not a great idea. You have to have a really good company first, and then, if you're a clean tech company, that's great. But I would rather start a really great company than start a mediocre clean tech company. the Cleantech part is very nice, but it's not the reason things succeed or not.
I should add, by the way, because I've sort of heard it here, in clean technology, price still really matters. It's price and performance. And just because you're doing something good, that's great. But how much does it cost me? Because lots of other people can do it too.
Yeah. There's a deep value proposition to each of your innovations beyond just the clean tech side. Next question.
For all three of your companies, it seems that IP is a really important thing in order to establish yourself in the market. Now, as a startup company, at what point did you start to invest into IP, not just in terms of manpower, but in actual capital? Did you bootstrap your IP, or did you wait for your first round of capital coming in to be able to pay for your IP?
Great question.
Very good question. So we filed for a patent just about a year ago now. So we'll actually be seeing how that comes pretty soon. We did it relatively quickly. Actually, part of the Entrepreneurship 101 thing, they actually do a great session on patents, which taught us a lot about how to think about it. What's an appropriate time to take the patent? Do you want to do a provisional first? Do you want to just file? And your technology has to be at least at a point where you can describe it in a way that you're not going to be making huge changes when you're actually going to file. So there is a bit of a judgment call. A lot of people have told me and do say, start doing it as soon as humanly possible, particularly if you're in a crowded market. It does really depend on your IP. We didn't wait for our first round of financing, and actually I probably wouldn't, because one of the questions you will always get asked by people who are coming in to give you money is, do you have any intellectual property? They want to invest in something that someone at least thought there was enough meat there to actually go for a patent, and B, there might be some defensible IP, and C, you're not going to be a victim of someone who came up with the same thing and you've just spent 3 years developing something that you're actually violating someone else's patent. So it's not that expensive if you take this sort of going from take these workshops, work with the lawyers, do the provisional one first and take it that way. It's not that bad. I mean, you're talking about 10 to 15K maybe to do it. It's something that's worth sort of swallowing if you can. And I would definitely suggest doing the patent workshop, because what it really helped us do, you're not going to get out of it knowing how to write a patent, but you're going to get out of it understanding how it gets written. One of the activities was actually sitting with an old invention and trying to write the patent and looking at the real one, so that when you sit down with the law firm that you've hired to do it, you're paying them a lot of money by the hour. So if you can describe it to them in their terms what you want to do, and they don't have to spend weeks with you and your engineers trying to figure out what the heck it is your thing actually does, you can make that a lot more affordable. So I really want to add to that. Quite frankly, if you go to an investor and you haven't filed a patent, he's going to tell you to come back. And I would not just encourage you to file before you go looking for money. I'd encourage you to file at least a year before you plan to go looking for money, because by then your patents, if you went for provisional, have been published, but so have the provisional patents of anyone who may have filed ahead of you. Because the worst thing that can happen to you is find out, oops, you don't own the IP. And that can happen, and you don't know until a year after they file whether or not they filed. So there is always this potential torpedo in the water, and your investors will know that. And if they don't know that, then I don't know how the heck they got their money. So I wouldn't just file before you go looking for money. I'd file a year before you plan to go looking for money, because then you can say, we've done the background searches, we know nothing's been published in the interim, and our provisional has just been published. So if your patent may not be granted for another couple of years. Our patent took 2.5 years from when it was published to when it was granted. But they know that there isn't at least that torpedo in the water, and that's a big one. And you're basically choosing to value your company at 1/10 of what it might be worth with patents granted. You're basically saying you need the same amount of money for the next year. You're saying to them, I need X. Well, with those patents, X is worth a much smaller chunk of your company than it is without them. And so you're choosing to just give them more if they decide to give you money at all.
In our case, Burn Brush, the inventor I talked about, actually sold his house. He traded down on his house to invest into the company. One of the first things he invested into was patents. So that was something we had early on, and it does make a big difference when you're talking to investors, not just have patents pending, but in our case, we even actually had one patent granted, which is good validation. Now, I will warn you to think really hard. In our case, we have a lot of people who are trying to figure out how we've done what we've done. And we actually protect things with a mixture of patents and trade secrets. And remember, a patent is a formula which says exactly how you've done what you've done. So anyone else could copy it. They're just not supposed to be. Well, you can take them to court if they have. But we've actually thought very carefully about what goes in patents and is public and what goes in trade secrets, and getting a good overlapping mix of the two. And by the way, this trade secret, that's just bloody good engineering on top of that. You stick the three things together and you can often protect things in the real world, in a competitive environment, better than just a patent alone, which investors like, but frankly, defending a patent is a whole new story on its own, that you don't want that to be the only thing you've got.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Take the time to make sure your lawyers really do understand the underlying concepts. You're paying them a lot of money, and in our case, what we're doing is very technical. It was some very sophisticated physics, and we ended up later on hiring an absolutely brilliant patent expert, one of the best in the business, and he found us because he happened to specialize in the particular types of technologies we do. But he realized very early on that our lawyers had not really understood our patent, and so the claims that they had made really weren't quite the claims they should have made, and so we had to make a lot of amendments, and that was expensive and painful, and it actually increased our risk. Really take the time to make sure the lawyers really get it, and you're paying them by the hour, but those 2 or 3 extra hours you spend with them breaking it down so they really can describe it properly are worth a heck of a lot, and they'll save you a lot of time and trouble later.
And that is the trade-off, by the way. We ran into the same thing. The patent we got granted, did it too early, didn't do it well enough. A good patent lawyer, and ideally you want someone who's actually tried to defend patents in court before, because they've got deep experience at defending patents. And by the way, you won't necessarily find a lot of that experience here in Toronto. You may end up, in our case, we're using patent lawyers out of the UK because we deal so much internationally. There's a lot of really good patent agents in the US if you're focused on the US market too. So think really hard about, if you've got someone here, make sure it's someone really good and deeply experienced, and don't be afraid to go abroad if you need to.
Thank you.
Thanks. We're just going to do one last question.
One of the things that you guys talking about was the long-term goals. And I was really wondering, as for each of you, like, what are your long-term goals in the company, and where do you guys want to see that company go to?
Well, the investors don't give you money to feel good about themselves. They give you money because they want 10 times that money back at least, minimum. And that's a basic strategy because most companies fail. Most companies that get investments fail. And so if there isn't a 10x on the occasional one that doesn't fail, the whole investment model doesn't work. So the investors, when you start it, you have to understand there has to be a way for them to get their money out. And that if you don't understand how that's going to work and how that fits with your vision of the company, you shouldn't be asking for money at all. So you have to have a way to either grow to the point where there's an exit, an IPO, a major acquisition, and you have to have a reasonable path to get there. So to say where we're going to be in 5 years, well, I would like to be, either negotiating an acquisition or going public with the company, or in doing something to help my investors get their money back out, because that's the deal I made with them when I took their money in the first place. Now, how I'm going to grow to get there, we're building something, so we're going to sell it. We're not going to install it and own the projects ourselves. We're going to sell the projects to developers, use the profits to reinvest into more manufacturing capacity so we can make more of these to sell more and multiply the value of the company that way. But you have to understand how people value companies so that you can understand what a realistic exit strategy is. But at the end of the day, your strategy has to be exponential growth with a realistic way of getting there, or you're taking people's money in bad faith.
Thanks very much. With that, we're going to actually have to cut it off here. I know there's lots more questions, but there's still an opportunity to ask them. There's going to be a reception right through these doors that these guys are going to stick around for. So you'll have a chance to ask them some more questions. My only request is that you let them get to the reception as opposed to coming up to the stage. You'll get much better answers once they have a drink in their hand. So with that, thanks very much, everyone, and thanks very much to these three.